Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Some Stops Along the Way, the podcast that highlights some of the most interesting countries in the world through the lens of their geopolitics, their history, and their culture. And I'm your host, Mark McCord. We have a very special episode today uh, featuring two women that I'm very excited to have on the podcast, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to give you a little bit of context. The context of this is that our two representatives today represent the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. And by the way, March the 21st is the 4-year anniversary of the founding of this society, and so this comes in at a very timely period for both the society and, quite frankly, for Ukraine, which is now 4 years into an illegal and debilitating war, um, uh, having been invaded by Russia on February the 24th, 2022. I also want to announce one other thing that I think is really important, and that is that my new novel, here it is, The Ghost of Mariupol, will go live today on Amazon. In fact, as you're listening to this, it's already live on Amazon. And I am donating 100% of all of the proceeds from this novel to the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. Now, those of you who don't know how the Amazon algorithm works, the sales in the first 2 weeks are the most critical because that charts the trajectory of the book and therefore makes it more visible. More visibility means more sales. More sales means more revenue that goes to the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. So I think that you'll enjoy this novel. I started writing it when I was in fact, I wrote most of it while I was in Ukraine. And while it is a novel, I have had Ukrainian friends fact check me to make sure that I get the salient historical and geopolitical context correct. But I think it's a compelling story. I think it's one that everyone needs to hear because while this book is fiction, this conflict is not. And I think that what is discussed in this novel is something that everyone who is not Ukrainian, who wants to get beyond what the news is saying and really understand the human element of this tragedy will be interested in. So I hope that you will jump onto Amazon even today and grab a copy of that because it will allow the Ukrainian Society of Indiana to provide even more support to their stakeholders. Okay, all of that being said, I want to jump into the podcast now. I have with me today two of the founders of the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. I don't know if you're the only two founders, but we're going to call you the co-founders of the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. Svitlana Ramer is not only one of the co-founders, but she's also honorary consul for Ukraine in Indiana, and we'll talk a little bit more about your position a little bit later on in the podcast. And then we also have Mariya Plichta, who is with us today, and you're both in Indianapolis, I believe, correct?
Yes.
So, and Mariya is also a co-founder and is someone who I think is going to have some really important things to say today. So, what we want to do is just get started and hear from you now. I think everybody's heard enough from me already. So, where I'd like to start, if you don't mind, is to really understand the origins and the vision of the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. And I'll throw this out maybe to you, Mariya, first, and then Lana, you can jump in from there. But what moment or experience first convinced each of you that Indiana needed a Ukrainian society?
Thank you, Mark. For me, it was the moment of the full-scale invasion back in February 2022. My husband is Polish, and we have been very involved with the Polish Society in Indiana, which has been part of our community for nearly 50 years now. When the invasion started, many people across Indiana began reaching out to Polish society, asking how they could help Ukraine. That was when I realized there was a real need, not only for support efforts, but for a dedicated Ukrainian organization here in Indiana. Through the president of the Polish Society, I was connected with Svitlana. Just after one call, we both felt strongly that this was something we needed to create. With my background in banking and business and Svetlana's experience in public and community work, we knew we could build something meaningful together. And our goal was to help to bring Ukrainians in Indiana together, to unite community and to show strong and visible support for our homeland during this such a difficult time.
Great. And Lana, was the full scale invasion the impetus for you as well, or had you been thinking about this prior to the invasion as well?
There were some thoughts percolating in my head starting in November of 2021 because there have been news about Russia amassing troops on Ukraine's border. Of course, there was a lot of conversation of there's no way, this is not going to happen. But the feeling, the sort of the sense of dread was already there. And that was the time when I also was looking for a new job, and I found a job at the International Center because I wanted to be close to the field of international affairs. Little did I know that I was going to start my job on February 22nd, celebrate my birthday on February 23rd, and learn about my country being invaded on the 24th. And I know I shared the very visceral experience of that in a prior episode with Mayor Yuri Bova, which I recommend everyone needs to listen to that episode of Some Stops Along the Way. And after that initial shock, we all started doing everything we could. I mean, I had a stockpile of Ukrainian embroideries made by my aunt. I just started selling them to my friends to just make, raise any kind of money to then send them to foundations in Ukraine. It was an incredibly chaotic time. And I, at the time, was speaking to the honorary consul of Latvia in Indiana, who's been a steadfast supporter and has his own family history of surviving Soviet Union invading Latvia. So he's been so supportive. And after talking to him about these ideas, he said, I am going to connect you with the president of the Polish Society, who knows a Ukrainian woman who also wants to do something a little bit more than just collecting, haphazardly
Mhm.
collecting donations. And as Maria mentioned, one call and one Starbucks meeting later,
Mhm.
we have started the society. And as she mentioned, we definitely got very lucky with the combination of skills. And we are the only two co-founders. We sort of brought everyone else into the fold, but the combination of our skills allowed us to get started very quickly.
Outstanding. And what the listeners need to realize here is that this full scale invasion on February 24th, 2022, was not the beginning of this conflict between Ukraine and Russia. This dates back all the way to 2014, when Ukraine has been continually under threat and under attack from Russia in Donbass and Crimea, etc. So this is not just an event that happened overnight that no one was expecting. Maybe the size and scale of it was surprising, but Russia had been aggressive to multiple countries around it for many years, and so certainly what occurred in Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, was not a one-off. It was a pattern of behavior by the Russians. So when you look back at the early days of building the Ukrainian Society of Indiana, what stands out the most? What were the challenges that you had in the beginning? What momentum did you gain? And what response did you get when you started reaching out to diaspora and other potential supporters? Lana, you want to take this one first? And then
Of course. I think, again, being very lucky with some of my connections in the international affairs sphere, but also Maria has been so instrumental in setting up our bylaws as well as getting our banking set up, and the very uneasy task of submitting the IRS paperwork for the nonprofit for the US 501c3 charitable status. That's very difficult. While I was reaching out to my vast contact network to set up the board and get some of the other executive team members in the fold. We've never done anything like this before. I know Maria's been connected with the Polish Society. I haven't had any sort of experience with setting up a cultural nonprofit, and it was very scary. It was one of those, like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to reach out to people. We were just reaching out to some of our closest friends to form our first board. But I think what I really wanted to do, what was very, very important for me and for Maria early on, is to ensure that we set up this organization to the utmost standard of compliance and rules. We had an executive team, we had bylaws, we had a full board. We set up board meetings right away so that there could be proper governance structure. We also got our annual meetings set up with our members, and where members would vote on the important things that were happening in the society. And also, and this is a big credit to Maria, even though our organization doesn't raise the amount of money that triggers the threshold for requiring an independent audit. Every year since the foundation of the society, we've had an independent audit that looks through all of our financials. We are also an organization that's fully volunteer run, which I'm really, really proud of. We have essentially, other than like paying for our website and for the PO box, we have no overhead costs. And the fact that 4 years later, the society is still thriving and there are new initiatives being launched, which I know we'll talk about later, is the testament to how our community has come together. Our community is also not big. And so Indiana is not a state that has a ton of Ukrainians. We are not Chicago. We are not New York or Philadelphia. And so to be able to continue the functioning of this organization is just giving me a lot of pride.
Right. So, Maria, how did you find the Ukrainians when you were starting the society? How did you find this relatively small group of Ukrainians to come together and really form the core of this organization?
I feel like what stand out, the most powerful and this overwhelming is the support from our community. We, at that time, few months in after establishing our organization, we held our first Ukrainian festival. We didn't know what to expect. Seeing how many people came, showed up together, Ukrainians and Americans alike, was deeply moving. Under such a horrific circumstances back home,
Right.
people came together not just to celebrate Ukrainian culture, but to stand in solidarity. It was more than a festival, I feel like, for me. It was the moment of unity, resilience, and hope. It showed us that this organization was needed, not only to provide support, but to create a space where people could gather, feel connected, and remind each other, even in the darkest time, community is strength. And that was the time when a lot of Ukrainians started coming to Indiana. And I was very surprised how many of Ukrainians, were around us now. And it was just the beginning.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think it would be great to hear how your personal journeys brought you to this point. How did the two of you end up in the United States and specifically in Indiana, and how did that shape your experience and your view, if you will, or you to be able to start an organization like this?
I feel like for me was I moved here in 2008 to connect with family members that been here for some time, And one of the biggest challenges for me was the lack of Ukrainian community. There wasn't an established place where Ukrainians could gather, celebrate traditions, and speak our language or simply feel understood. I often think that if something like that had already existed, my first years here would have been much easier and less lonely. Because there was such a void in my life, it deeply shaped the mission we later created. When the war forced so many Ukrainians to flee and come here, I knew how important it was to offer them once that I once wished I had, the sense of belongings. The society became a home for many who arrived because of war. It gave them a small piece of Ukraine in foreign land, a place filled with warmth and language and culture and familiar traditions even. At the same time, it wasn't only for the newly arrived. For those of us who lived here for in America for many years, the society gave us strength and unity during this incredible painful time. Even though there was no war when we first moved here, I now realize that building community is always important, but in moments of crisis, it became essential. Through this organization, we created not just support system, but shared sense of resilience and hope for all of us.
Right. And of course, all of you have friends and family members back in Ukraine as well.
Yeah.
That creates that ongoing stress as this tragedy has unfolded over the last 4 years. Lana, I know a little bit about your backstory, but can you share briefly uh, how you have arrived at this point and how that shaped you?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I actually was just having a conversation yesterday. There's someone who's here in Indiana who was a classmate of mine back in Ukraine. We literally went to the same school, and she came here after the start of the full-scale invasion to join some family members. And she's now on the board of the society, and she's our volunteer coordinator. And we were talking about how sort of how we came to be this way, and we were very fortunate, obviously, um, to grow up in independent Ukraine. Mariya is from the west of Ukraine, western part of Ukraine, which has had opportunity to maintain a lot of the cultural identity for longer. I come from central Ukraine, and so we really started getting a lot of opportunities like that after Ukraine became independent. I had a phenomenal geography teacher who actually took us on a lot of trips to learn Ukraine, not by book, but by sight, and fell in love with the country. And we had her best friend was our history teacher. And at that time, we were allowed to learn about things like Holodomor, the famine genocide, and the true reason behind what happened to Chernobyl, and some of these other, the gulags, and understanding the constant onslaught of various Moscow-based regimes, whether it's the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, against the Ukrainian lands. And so they have really brought up a very historically informed and geographically rooted in real place love for the country. And so in 2004, when I was in my first semester as a college student, was when the Orange Revolution happened, which was sort of the start of this entire movement towards Ukraine pushing away Russian influence. And I was there on Independence Square, being part of our group of students from my university who were protesting the election fraud and wanting the pro-European presidential candidate to be rightfully installed. And so I've always had this desire to be a part of something that made a difference in Ukraine, that made an impact in Ukraine. And I also moved to the US in 2008, like Maria. I came here for grad school. And everywhere I went, whether it was doing my master's in North Carolina, I connected with Ukrainians there. When I went to Penn State for my doctorate, I became a member of the Ukrainian Society of Penn State. Pennsylvania has more Ukrainians. And then when I lived in Texas, I became the member of Ukrainian American Cultural Society of Houston. And then when I came to Indiana, there was nothing. And I remember a similar sense of lostness as Maria describes, and just kind of trying to join little pockets of of people from Eastern Europe to hang out and formally. But then, of course, when the first full-scale invasion started, that was the impetus. That was like, that's it. We are creating a hub for our community, which will allow us to get together, to honor our culture, to provide this home, but also to raise funds to be able to support people in Ukraine.
And this brings me to both of your comments here. Bring me to another question that I have. And well, what does Ukrainian identity mean to you today? Especially you're in the Midwest. There aren't a lot of Ukrainians where you are. How has your view of your own identity as Ukrainians in the Midwest changed since you founded the society, or since you started making these connections?
I would say that for me, being a Ukrainian American, being a Ukrainian here in the Midwest, feels like a grave responsibility. I just feel a lot of responsibility, especially since we started the society, especially since we are known as the co-founders, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
in the leadership of the organization. People look to us to bring the community together, which is a lot of pressure, for the society to be successful, to have successful events, to raise funds. That's a lot of pressure. But also, whenever any sort of external parties, such as yourself, who wants to understand the Ukrainian community in Indiana, reach out to us, and we become the voice of our community, and we become the voice of Ukraine in the United States through various public appearances or lectures, anywhere from podcasts and conferences to being invited to World Thinking Day by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, and having a chance to speak to little children and explain to them why independent Ukraine and Ukraine's existence is important. It's a great sense of, it's an honor, but it's also a great sense of responsibility, and at times almost crushing pressure.
Right, right. And so, Maria, what are some of the initiatives that you're most proud of? And first of all, how many members does the society have today? And what are some of those initiatives that you're most proud of that the society's been able to initiate?
Well, some of the initiatives that I'm most proud of would be, we created the Ukrainian Language Learners Cafe, where Americans and or Ukrainians who have been here since they were born, that can come together and learn Ukrainian. They meet every week. They share their progress and connect with people from Ukraine, and it's so good to see how they gain confidence, celebrate small milestones together. They build friendship, then they read poems at our other events. People who never spoke Ukrainian. I think that's incredible initiative that we established here. Another one was also the Ukrainian Society Book Club. Um, Initially was funded by the grant that we received. We were able to buy books, and um, this is an opportunity to read modern Ukrainian literature and discussing it in their, our native language. The conversations are rich and heartfelt and often spark reflection on identity, resilience, and cultural preservation. On the other side, we also created, after having a big fundraiser where we raised funds, we were able to purchase Ukrainian children's book and donate them to Indianapolis Public Library Nora branch. Each month, we hold bilingual story time for the children. Um, it's incredible to see our community to come together and to celebrate our culture, and also it's educational as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of our, pillars that we are this organization is about.
And if I would like to underscore what Maria is saying, because a lot of these initiatives are absolute first times
Right.
for Ukrainians in Indiana, right? Receiving a grant from Indiana Language Roadmap for that initial round of the book club, and then having members be so interested that they continued to purchase books with their own funds and continue the conversation. Like, that's the first time something like that became available through like a state level grant for the Ukrainian community. The bilingual story times, the Ukrainian English bilingual story
Mm-hmm.
times that Maria mentioned, the Indianapolis Public Library system has only had one such program before, which was Spanish English. And we reached out to them and offered up to donate books and then use those books to offer Ukrainian English bilingual story times. And then in December, for a couple years, we've turned the bilingual story times into a St. Nicholas Day fundraiser, which just most recently in December we raised funds and donated them to an orphanage in a city in Ukraine that has a sister city in the state of Indiana. So we're continuing to have those connections, but also making tangible, right? Through creating culturally joyful events for the community here, we're also able to make an impact in Ukraine, which is what we're striving to do with most of
Yes.
our events. And I would say that the initiative that we're most excited about going forward, which is brand new and something that's still in development, is after 4 years of having the society, we're actually helping launch a Ukrainian School of Indiana,
Oh,
a
that's great.
Saturday school. And we have a president and a treasurer and a secretary, and they have the articles of incorporation have been approved. They've already submitted their IRS paperwork. We've secured location, several classrooms in a local school that we'll be able to use. And we're also amending the society's bylaws to make the connection between the society and the school more robust. So we have liaisons, and the school's president will come to our board meetings and report on the progress of the school. We've supported them financially. So we are trying to make sure that the school, which is a separate nonprofit,
Mhm.
is supported by the society so they don't have it as hard as we had it in the beginning.
So the society's obviously made an amazing impact on Ukrainians and continues to do that, rolling out new programs and building on programs that you've already started. What about Americans? How have Americans responded to the society, and what misconceptions about Ukraine or Ukrainians do you find yourselves trying to correct along the way?
One of the misconceptions we must offer here is about Ukraine's identity and language. People sometimes assume that Ukraine is part of Russia, or that Russian is the main language spoken in the country. We have gently but firmly corrected them. Ukraine is fully independent nation with its own language, culture, history, and traditions. Ukraine is the official language of Ukraine, and while many Ukrainians do, however, speak Russian, it's not the defined language of the country. Another common misconception is that Ukraine is just a place of crisis, or only known for war. People often don't, realize the richness of Ukrainian culture, the literature, the music, arts, festivals, and centuries of history. We try to show that Ukraine is vibrant, resilient, and full of creativity, not only a headline in the news cycle. Some also assume the Ukrainians have the same experience or background, but in reality, Ukraine is diverse with multiple regions, languages, traditions, perspectives. We correct the idea that one story represents all Ukrainians, emphasizing the variety and depth of our people. Um, Finally, I also think that there's sometimes maybe a confusion about diaspora. Many Americans don't realize how long Ukrainians have been part of this community. And there's already a strong network of Ukrainian Americans who have been contributing to society for generations.
Mhm.
We truly show that Ukraine's influence and presence is alive here, not just something foreign or distant. But overall, Americans have been a great support to Ukraine and Ukrainians community. They open up their homes. They come to our fundraisers. So I think there is a solidarity, and they show tremendous support.
I just want to say to all of our American friends who are listening to this podcast and others who are non-Ukrainian, may not be American. Ukraine is best experienced on the ground. This is a fantastic country. I was there in the late 1990s, back again during this period after the full scale invasion, and I can tell you, even with all the challenges you hear about on a daily basis, this is a country that's open for business. It's open for investment. It's culturally rich, as Maria said. It's historically one of the most interesting countries in the region. And I intend to be there for the victory party. I hope that as many Americans as possible will flock to Ukraine and experience the culture and the history and the food and the hospitality that I've experienced even during this period of war, which will be even more rich and satisfying after the period when the invaders are expelled. So, Lana, do you have anything to add to what Maria said?
I think I agree with everything she said. I think that also in some on some more of the more diplomatic level, perhaps I have to do a lot of explaining around the context of the full scale invasion, why um, you know people asking, well, isn't aren't people in the east of Ukraine, don't they want to be a part of Russia? Aren't they all Russian speaking? Shouldn't you just give up those territories? Like, why are you
Mm-hmm.
fighting to get back those territories? Don't people, like, didn't people have a referendum there and decide to be with Russia? So there's
Mm-hmm.
Russian propaganda machine is incredibly strong in the United
Mm-hmm.
States
Mm-hmm.
through a variety of different mechanisms, including Roll Call, which is Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
It's very strong in America, and it's sharing a lot of these sort of propaganda standard statements. And so then I have to dive deep with people into Ukraine's history and go back to 1931 to the famine genocide and explaining that the Soviet regime starved close to 7 million Ukrainians by taking away all of their food and killing them for even trying to glean grains on their empty fields. And then once all those villages stood empty, they moved and relocated Russian people into those villages, and then they intermixed with Ukrainians. So there's a reason why a lot of people there feel certain affinity with Russia or have Russian as their most common language. That has historic roots, and it doesn't mean that that's just naturally how things happen. And we also see from some of the deoccupied, some of the liberated territories, the devastation, the torture chambers that are left behind, the mass graves. We can If we leave those territories to Russians, that means stolen children that are sent into militarization camps.
Right.
That means filtration camps for adults where they are checked for Ukrainian patriotic
Right.
tattoos and killed if they have any. Like, I have to do a lot of explaining around why Ukraine's stance on territorial integrity is so strong.
Right. And for listeners who may not be familiar or whose information about Ukraine comes primarily from the news, I think it's important to have these conversations to understand what is, as much as we can, what is really happening on the ground. I have been in Bucha, talked to the priest who had to deal with the fallout of the Russian pillaging of that community and the atrocities that were committed, and actually stood on the steps of the church and showed me on his phone pictures of some of the most horrifying things that I've ever seen. And believe me, I've worked in virtually every war zone in the world, so I've seen some pretty horrifying stuff. And very little of that compared to what I just saw on his phone. And the trauma um, that Ukrainians have gone through is something that is that I don't think anybody can understand who hasn't been there and lived it. But also, I think it's important to understand the resilience of Ukrainians as well. Um, Down through history, from the famine to all the other things that have happened, the Ukrainians have persevered. They've survived. They've built their culture. They've built their language. They have built a society that's a strong, independent, and free society. And I think that gets lost in this as well sometimes from the standpoint of Americans. But as I alluded before, Maria, Lana, you both have family and friends back in Ukraine. How do you stay connected to them and to the events that are going on in Ukraine, especially during this very cold winter when a lot of the energy infrastructure has been destroyed, communications have somewhat been disrupted? How do you stay connected, and how does this ongoing connection to your family and friends there shape the work that you're trying to do here? Because it's not just educate, you're doing educational work in promoting the Ukrainian culture and language, but you're also doing informational work to try to help others understand what's really happening in Ukraine. So how does this connection with events on the ground in Ukraine help you do that in a better way?
Well, first and foremost, I keep in communication with my friends and my close family who still live in Ukraine. But I also, stay connected by following the news closely. It helps them understand the evolving situation and the urgent needs on the ground. Beyond that, we also maintain active relationship with nonprofit organizations that we in Ukraine that we have supported over the years. We regularly communicate with them to hear directly about their challenges, priorities, and how resources are being used. This connection shapes our work here in Indiana in a very particular way. When we learn about specific needs, we can organize community events, fundraisers, and initiatives that directly support the causes of those organizations. We always making sure that the organization we help in Ukraine are aligned with our mission here. It also helps us educate and engage our community, showing them exactly how their support makes a thinkable difference. Staying connected ensures that our efforts here are informed, meaningful, and responsive, not just symbolic. It reinforces the idea that the event, even thousands of miles away, we are part of larger community,
Right,
Ukrainian community, and we can contribute to its resilience and recovery. So staying
right.
connected with people who are on the ground in Ukraine, it's crucial in this time. It's,
It and Lana, because I know some of your backstory, and I don't want to get too personal here, or you share anything that you don't want to share, but your mother is still in Ukraine, and I know that what you shared during our episode with Mayor Bova was very touching as far as the trauma that you and your mother both went through when this full scale invasion started. But your mother has chosen to stay in Ukraine. It's her home, and what do you draw? What resilience and strength do you draw from her that helps drive what you're doing on this side of the ocean?
Yeah, she's a great inspiration for me because her ability to just tell me every day what challenges she is overcoming, it really prevents me from giving up, and when the going gets tough, or we're not having enough engagement for our events or something, or we didn't raise as much money through a fundraiser as I hoped we would. And then my mom tells me, oh yeah, we haven't had electricity for 5 days, and I haven't had hot tea in 3 days, and I haven't taken a shower, or here's this piece of cardboard that I carry in my purse because I live on the 13th floor and the elevator isn't working. So I get up to floor 6, and then I put this piece of cardboard on the floor and I sit on it and I rest, and then I walk the rest of the way. Nothing I'm dealing with comes
Right.
even close
Right.
to what she's dealing with. In the most recent attack, the big attack on January 9th, my uncle's apartment windows blew out. You know, like, it might be cold here in Indiana, but they have negative 20 degrees Celsius, and his windows blew out because of the blast.
Right.
So understanding what they're going through and having that daily connection with the challenges that they're going through. um, my mom showed me, they had a big damage from a missile landing very close to their office. I mean, all the windows and doors caved in, all the windows blew out, the ceiling came down. Like, she had to work in an unheated office for weeks, right? Like, nothing I'm dealing with here comes even close to what they're dealing with there. And I would say that the other thing that keeps me going and keeps me motivated is that I have been truly blessed with my prior role at DAI, and then my current role at Razom, with being able to go to Ukraine for work
Right.
and have that on the ground experience. Between the trips I made just to see my mom, I
Right.
counted, just so I could have it right for the podcast. I've been to Ukraine 8 times since the beginning of the full scale invasion. So it makes it an average of 2 times per year. So that's a pretty good keeping the hand on the pulse. I mean, I was in Ukraine, in Kyiv, in my apartment on the night of October 21st through 22nd, when it was the largest attack that happened on Kyiv until the January 9th attack.
Right.
And I just laid on the floor of the hallway, right? Because you're doing the rule of the two walls, and the whole building is shaking, and you're just listening to the explosions,
Right.
and you understand why you come back and do what you do, because what's happening is not right, and it's not supposed to be happening.
Right.
And being able to go to Ukraine and keep in touch with all these nonprofits, as Maria mentioned. So with the society, at each annual meeting, we choose 3 nonprofits that are based in Ukraine and align with our missions to make a $1,000 donation to. And throughout the time that I've traveled to Ukraine, I've had a chance to then meet in person with the recipients of our donations. I've had a chance to volunteer with some of them. There's an organization that helps orphanages in Ukraine, and I went with them twice to orphanages to volunteer with the kids. So I get to see the impact that our donations, however maybe small they might be compared to some of the other big
Right.
nonprofits, it still really matters.
Right.
And so between connection with my mom and trips there, regular trips there, is what really keeps me going.
I think another thing that Americans need to understand is that this war is not just a war between two countries, and the implications of this war are not just among these two countries. This war affects not only the entirety of Europe, but it affects the trajectory of peace in the world, and that is and if uh, without the heroic fight that the Ukrainians have waged against alone, by the way, uh, against the Russians, the geopolitics of the world could look much different today than it looked on February the 24th, 2022. And so the stakes in Ukraine remain high. And those of us who have been supporters of Ukraine since from the very beginning hope that the American government and the American people will understand how high the stakes are, not get distracted, and realize that this conflict has broad-based implications for the entire world. But we've talked a lot about the trauma associated with this. We've talked a lot about the the, the all the negatives that have come into play, and I know that you're bombarded with them every day when you talk to your contacts in Ukraine and your family in Ukraine. But what gives you hope about Ukraine's future? Uh, can you see a silver lining in this whole situation? What are your thoughts on that, Maria? Let's start with you.
I think what gives me hope and is the resilience and courage of the Ukrainian people. Even under the pressure of drone attacks and displacements and uncertainty, they remain strong, brave, and determined. I truly hope that in the near future, Ukraine will be at peace, not just physically safe, but that the people will be able to return to their homeland, to their country, and to rebuild lives with dignity and freedom. Seeing how Ukrainians continue to support one another, protect their communities, and maintaining their culture, even in the darkest times, gives me a deep sense of optimism. It reminds me that no matter the challenges, the spirit of Ukraine cannot be broken, and that the spirit will guide the country towards a brighter and peaceful future.
I have a sign in my office that says "Be brave like Ukraine," and and I've said publicly in a lot of different speeches, and maybe this is a little bit colloquial, but I mean it in the best possible way. But Ukrainians are ninjas, as far as I'm concerned.
They sure are.
Uh, they are setting an example for the entire world. Lana, what gives you hope? Is it the same as Maria, or do you have a little bit of a different take?
I wanted it's some complementary things, but I wanted to react what you were saying with Ukrainians and ninjas because there's a meme that's kind of exploding around Ukrainian social media right now that says 2022 Ukraine is begging NATO to close the sky over Ukraine. 2026 NATO is begging Ukraine to help shoot down drones over the Middle East,
Yep,
right? Like
absolutely.
it's the amount of learning and the amount of development in the modern warfare that has taken place in Ukraine to where other countries are now looking to Ukraine to
Right,
gain this experience. And maybe if you've heard about the Operation Hedgehog, which was a joint NATO exercise to which Ukrainian drone operators were invited to participate, it took place in Estonia.
right,
10 Ukrainian drone operators took out 2 NATO battalions in the span of hours in a simulation,
right.
right? So if that tells you anything about sort of how advanced the understanding of modern defense and tactics have developed in Ukraine. So, but what gives me hope are one of it is an internal
Mhm.
pillar and one is external. The internal is that the full-scale invasion finally served as an impetus for Ukraine to fully embrace its own language and culture and to finally decouple from decades of Russian cultural influence and mental influence. We are undergoing a profound process, painful and profound process of decolonization. A lot of establishments are only, speak in Ukrainian. In bookstores, you will not find a single book in Russian language. So there's people are wearing traditional Ukrainian clothes just on the daily basis. The volunteering movement, the animal rights protection its movement have gone through the roof. It's like as when Ukrainians started getting attacked like this, their you know sense of consciousness just rose to extend to protection of all life. Like I have never seen before 2022 such a movement even around animal welfare
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
evacuating animals from the front lines, not just people, but I hear it on Ukrainian social media and from people who are volunteers, so my friends all the time. every life matters. Every life
Mhm.
matters. The
Absolutely.
smallest life matters.
Absolutely.
Whereas where Russians are coming in and just carpet bombing and razing things to the ground and just killing
Right.
everything and going on hunting safaris in biosphere reserves,
Right.
Ukrainians are trying to protect the smallest lives.
Right.
So internally, the country is transforming because of this. This was the wake up call.
Right.
Externally, you can never again, I think you can go back to a place where the world didn't even know what Ukraine was.
Right.
When I came here in 2008 and I wrote my master's thesis on destination image of Ukraine as seen by
Mhm.
Americans, people had no idea back in 2010 when I was publishing my thesis. People had no idea what Ukraine was. They
Right.
thought it was a region in Russia. Never again will people make that
Right.
mistake.
Absolutely.
And even in 2014, because world knew so little about Ukraine,
Mhm.
Russia got away with annexing Crimea, temporarily annexing
Mhm.
Crimea like quietly, right? Like,
Mhm.
and everybody was like, oh yeah, let's not do a war, let's not do martial
Mhm.
law. Both European leaders and at the time President Obama, they just
Mhm.
really pressured Ukraine to not do anything about Crimea being temporarily occupied.
Right.
Never again will Ukraine go down quietly.
Right.
Not after this.
Absolutely.
Everyone will know.
Understood. And I think that those who are not directly connected with this need to understand that this was a war that was supposed to last 3 days, and now it's lasted for 4 years because the Ukrainians not only fought back, they fought back well. I said in a speech not long ago, who knew the second best army in the world would become the second best army in Ukraine? The Russians have been the fallacies of their military might have been exposed in Ukraine. And I'm sure that if you talk to any Ukrainian, they would have wished to have skipped that. They would have wished that it never happened, but it did, and they fought back. And you're right; they'll never go down quietly again. So I think that's a really good point to make. We're coming down into the latter part of this podcast now. So Lana, I wanted to jump to you for just a moment to talk about your role as the honorary consul for Ukraine. Many of the listeners may not be familiar with what an honorary consul does. Could you explain that role, please?
Yeah, honorary consuls are volunteers who step up in the community to serve in support of the embassy or the consulate, especially in a country as big as the United States. No country can have a diplomatic representation in every state. That's just impossible. Ukraine only has five establishments. So there's the embassy in DC and consulate generals in New York, Houston, Chicago, and San Francisco. Each country treats their honorary consuls very differently, imbues them with different sets of responsibilities and sort of different ways in which they operate. So honorary consuls of Germany can process passports and visas and get a stipend for their work. Honorary consuls of France can help people receive their passports, and they have like their expenses related to this work reimbursed. Honorary consuls of Ukraine do not take care of any paperwork. All of that goes through consulate general. So it's really more of a community leader who steps up to try to be a liaison and a connector by promoting Ukrainian culture, by lobbying for opportunities to go on local media and talk about Ukraine and what's happening there, sort of informing maybe the consulate or the embassy of any needs on the ground. Sometimes in certain exceptional cases, this person can step in to protect the rights of Ukrainian citizens. Let's say if someone is detained or needs that kind of support, which hasn't happened really in the state of Indiana, but I know that in Minnesota, for example, a Ukrainian who's here legally on Uniting for Ukraine was detained by ICE, and so there's diplomatic
Right.
intervention that is needed.
Right.
So, but mostly it's just elevation of cultural identity. It is, trying to go and speak with local administration and legislators to inform them of the presence of Ukrainian community in their state, of the different initiatives. In the particular case of Indiana, because of some of the work that was started under USAID Hovedala project. It also has taken shape of a lot of municipal partnerships.
Mhm.
We've just had our most recent, the third sister city signed in October. Also, very excitingly, a sister state between Indiana and a region in Ukraine was signed. So it's more of this sort of being a community leader without necessarily having any of these very strict like documentation processing
Understood.
roles, not for Ukraine.
Do other states have honorary consuls to Ukraine, and do you and what connection do you have with them?
Yes, there's last I checked, there was either 11 or 12 individuals, and they can both be Ukrainians, people with Ukrainian roots, or individuals who are Americans who have no connection whatsoever. So the newest consul in Oklahoma, you'll be happy to know, with Oklahoma just got its honorary consul. He's American, but he's worked in missionary organizations, serving in Ukraine, working with chaplains, military chaplains in Ukraine for a very long time. The honorary consuls in Philadelphia and in Utah and Salt Lake City are incredibly active. So there's definitely a good network of individuals who are just very passionate about rallying the community to come together.
And those of you who watch this podcast know that Oklahoma is my native state, so go Sooners and Cowboys. Um, let's jump back now to in these closing minutes to the society itself. And Maria, when you think about the Ukrainian society 10 years from now, what do you hope it will become?
10 years from now, I hope the Ukrainian Society of Indiana will be a strong, vibrant hub for both Ukrainians and friends of Ukraine across the state. A place where culture, community, and support come together. I hope it will be recognized not only for providing humanitarian in time of need, but also for preserving and celebrating Ukrainian heritage through language programs, culture events, festivals, and educational initiatives. I hope it will continue to connect generations, those who have lived here for decades or newly who arrived seeking safety, young people growing up proud of their roots. I envision a society that inspires leadership, encourages volunteerism, and foster understanding between Ukrainians and their wider Indiana community. Ultimately, I hope it will be a lasting symbol of resilience, unity, and hope. A place where everyone feels welcome and supported and proud of being part of Ukrainian story here in Indiana.
And Lana, do other societies exist in states in the United States, and what contact do you have with them, and how does that factor into your long term plans for the society, Ukrainian Society of Indiana?
Yes, there are various Ukrainian nonprofit hubs. Ohio has numerous; they have a big Ukrainian population. Pennsylvania, New York, obviously Chicago and the outskirts, Illinois and outskirts of Chicago have a ton. I recently was able to connect with someone who has a Ukrainian hub, like a nonprofit in Michigan and also in
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin. And we've recently, as we were getting ready to submit the articles of incorporation for the Ukrainian school, we actually, myself and the president of the school, Victoria, we have made calls and connected with numerous Ukrainian leaders in other states who have long serving established Ukrainian Saturday schools to try to understand how they do that. So there's a lot of willingness from some of the more established communities to share their expertise with us. So now we feel a lot more comfortable with launching the school the way we're doing it, because we've gotten advice and recommendations from others. And also there are events that take place. So like Ukraine Action Summit in DC that happens twice a year. That's where active members of these hubs from each state come together. The latest Ukraine Action Summit had 750 people register, right? And these are the people who go to their congressional offices and talk about the Ukrainian population in their states, and try to talk to their legislators about the importance of pro-Ukraine legislation, of banning Russia's shadow fleet, and continuing aid to Ukraine and things like that. So all of these communities work together at certain points throughout the year to really advance understanding in the United States of our community. So I hope that the Ukrainian Society will continue to do so, continue to seek advice,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's for the school or for our own initiatives, or partner with other organizations throughout the United States. And a big dream of mine, if we're talking 10 years, I think that's plenty of time, but a big dream of mine is really to have a physical space,
Right.
to have a Ukrainian cultural center. We have a wonderful example here in Indiana of the Latvian Community Center that was created many years ago, when the Latvian community was able to raise funds to purchase land and build. We're not looking at anything. I mean, that building is so big and has two different big concert halls. We're not looking at anything that necessarily that ambitious, but just to have a small sort of office or a room somewhere where we could interact with people, hold some sort of office hours, have a small cultural display, or receive dignitaries or receive visitors, would be truly tremendous.
Outstanding. So I have one more question, and this may be the most important question in the entire podcast, and that's for both of you. What message would you like to leave with listeners who care about Ukraine, but maybe they just don't know what to do? They don't know what kind of support that they can lend to assist the Ukrainians during this time.
I would tell that everyone who cares about Ukraine but isn't sure how to help, and but every small action matters. You don't have to solve everything. Um, it's just learning about culture or attending our events can make a real difference. Um, One of the most powerful things you can do is to listen and respond to the needs of Ukrainian community, whether it's through donations or volunteering or simply offering support to someone who has been displaced at this moment. And for the future, I feel like it will also matter to be, we have plenty of events planned for the future. And volunteering is, always one of the things that you can help us with, and also this will help you to stay connected to Ukrainian organizations. And but if you don't know where to start, connecting to Ukrainian Society of Indiana is a great way to start, where help is needed mostly, and have a direct, meaningful impact. And finally, I would say is to stay informed,
Right.
even when the news don't cover Ukraine as much as it should. Taking
Right.
the time to understand what is really happening and sharing the knowledge helps keep conversation alive. Solidarity isn't only about money or material aid; it's about awareness, compassion, and standing together with Ukrainian as they rebuild, celebrate their culture, and protect their homeland. I think every act of support, no matter how small, sends a message that Ukrainians are not alone.
Lana, what about you? Any parting words for those who might want to help Ukraine?
Yeah, one of the two things I wanted to say is essentially what Maria said. Go find a Ukrainian and talk to them about what they need. Go find a local, either a person or an organization. A cursory Google search will probably show you what's available near your area. But in terms of ways to help, a structure I find especially helpful is something that I learned through my work in the nonprofit world, because that's what we always talk about with nonprofit board engagement. It's time, talent, and treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might have one, you might have two, you might have all three, but you probably have at least one of the three at any given time. And so time means volunteering. It's coming and helping put on the events and helping. We had an event where we packed meals to be sent to Ukraine. So if you have time to volunteer, come and volunteer. Talent means that you either come and donate a talent, like we're about to host a fundraiser talent show, right, where we will raise money by doing sort of a concert. And or it can also, talent also can mean connections. If you are connected to someone who is in a position to help, you can lend your networks to these local organizations. And treasure might mean a personal donation, might mean looking into your organization and seeing if it might be able to do a corporate sponsorship or support with an in-kind donation. So treasure also doesn't just mean giving your own money. It can also mean a connection to an entity that is able to support financially or donate something. I mean, there's a large nonprofit in Chicago that all they do is they take in decommissioned ambulances and then send them to Ukraine. We've taken in donations of firefighter gear and various things. So there are different ways in which you can help. But time, talent, or treasure, whatever you can offer that.
Thank you so much. And there are two other things just from my side that you can do. Number one, reach out to your congressman, your senator. Remind them that the Ukrainian issue remains important with everything else that's going on in the world. The Ukrainian issue remains important, and it is critical, not just to the security of Europe, but to the security of the entire world that the Ukrainians win. The second thing you can do is you can order this book, and it's a compelling story. I think you'll like it, but also those proceeds are going to go to the Ukrainian Society of Indiana, and so that's a small thing that you can do to support the society as well. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Mariya, Lana, thank you so much for coming on the Some Stops Along the Way podcast, and I just wish both of you success in building the Ukrainian Society of Indiana. And of course, we wish Ukrainians as a whole, those within the United States and other areas of the world, and those in Ukraine, we send them our best as well. So thank you so much, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroям slava. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.